And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Shabbat Show. It is great to be with you today. It's great to be back with you in general. Another week has gone by. This is a very special time. I find this to be a very touching time. This is a year. This marks a year of the beginning of this pandemic, the beginning of us being sent to our homes. This is a year from when the world as we knew it changed. And it's so important to take a moment and realize what a year can bring. Just what life looked like in 2019 and how impossible 2020 could have been. And we have to use this as a way to realize that just like we couldn't have imagined what took place to the negative, we can't even begin to imagine what could take place to the positive. And we are entering into this season where the lessons of Passover, the lessons of Exodus, the lessons of our relationship to God is everywhere. And it is so evident and so more relevant. It is as relevant as it was then as it is today. The opportunity to see that the Jewish people were at a period of time that seemed to be hopeless, and in a moment, everything turned around. Time has a way of giving us things we never thought possible, and God can do anything at any point. Passover. Passover is the beginning of hope. Passover is the narrative of opportunity, the narrative of anything is possible. And as we emerge with God's help from the pandemic that really shifted our lives just a year ago, we go through this accelerator called Passover. And I'm so excited to be with you today, so excited for today's show. As we said from Rabbi Dessler, you don't just observe holidays. They have to get into you. You have to experience them and change. And what we're going to be doing on this week's show is something fascinating. We're actually going to be meeting people that have had personal stories of Exodus, personal stories of freedom, to show how the story of Exodus, the story of Passover, plays out every generation. It plays out throughout our whole year. Yes, we once left Egypt, but we're not celebrating Passover today because we once left Egypt. Judaism isn't a religion that is commemorative. Judaism is dynamic. And the story of Egypt and the story of Passover and the story of Exodus didn't once just happen. It happens and is happening all the time in my life and in your life. And the lessons that we're going to do a little bit today, and the lessons that we'll talk about again next week, and the lessons of the Seder and the lessons of Passover are lessons that apply every single year to us anew. So I hope you stick with us in tonight's show. We got a great show. We got two amazing stories of people with very Passover-esque stories that we're going to bring to you today and bring out some of the lessons there. So stick with us all the way to the end. Of course, this show is sponsored as a program of the Carl Enoch Goldman Center for Jewish Values, dedicated by Jay Goldman, and we appreciate Jay for his dedication. We're honored to be connected to the center. And we thank you so much for joining us. We thank you so much for being with us. And we're going to show a lot of just who we are and just how much life can change us on the show. Of course, you could always go to theshabbatshow.com to listen to this show, to watch the extended interviews, to look at some of the interviews from previous shows, but also in specific for Passover resources. As you prepare for your Seder, as you prepare for your experience, we've got a Haggadah companion with commentary waiting for you. Check it out. Go to theshabbatshow.com for your Passover resources and Haggadah companion. MindFlex is happening this week. Check it out on Tuesday, March 23rd. The Secret of Emotional Freedom. taking the bones of Yosef with you, and on March 24th, relying on miracles, and you shall be silent. Two great shows coming up this week to prepare you for Passover. Everything is going to be all focused on this. This is the time. Exciting, exciting stuff. And we're looking forward to next week's show as well, which hopefully will have something special for you. We got great videos coming up on this show. Meir Spivak from Portland, Oregon is on how to make Passover in 5 days. Merrill Kramer is on with his incredible story. Yola Rietman is on, a former Mossad agent with an incredible story that we all know is a famous story that has turned into a Netflix movie. It's all coming up right now. Before we begin, let's jump in with a great Passover music video from H.com. Check it out.
Yearn to be free, roots long ago, in captivity, let my people go. Your first name is free, last name is dumb. The place you have seen, a nation is born. Been so long, it's in every human being. Time for liberation, say split your wings. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Struggle for freedom to celebrate on Passover is seen throughout history. Fighting persecution so we can live as Jews, one from Moses to Natan Sharansky. Suffragists rose up our saints, man, Tiananmen Square got the purple finger in Iraq. Now ring the bell, pull the Berlin Wall down, and then we start to dream like Malala. God, you know I want your love. Your monster's handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow God's lead. Pharaoh is finished, now you're free. Matzah, the bread of freedom. Put on your shoulder, go to the desert quickly. Come on now, follow God's lead. Come on now, follow God's lead. I'm in love with the taste of you. Need and roll 18 minutes too. Although my stomach is falling too. I'm in love with my matzah. Oh, 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 I'm in love with my matzah. Oh, 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 I'm in love with my matzah. Struggle for freedom is all about you. Slaved and beaten, that's an issue. You have a choice. Hey, challenges can make us stronger. Try and hold on a little longer. And then we have thanks in our heart. Bitterness makes you count your stars. And all the pain recall throughout Jewish history, you guided us far. And now we're free. And now we're free. So God pull us ever closer, let us celebrate Passover as we tell our story over. Bite that matzah on your shoulder, Jewish people getting older. So many miracles to share, faith and family coming over. Have a meaningful Passover. Have a meaningful Passover. Have a meaningful Passover.
And we thank Aish.com as always for providing us such enjoyable experiences and entertainment. We really, really appreciate it. Let's begin with our first guest. Meir Spivak is the director of Oregon NCSY, where over the past 15 years, she has been developing Jewish programming for teens and parents. She's a trained facilitator in the systematic inventive thinking, SIT method. It's a method of creativity and innovation, and is the author of the book How to Make Pesach in 5 Days, which is perfect for right now. As a mother of a large family, Meira understands the stresses of everyday life, and when she's not busy stressing from them, she's laughing at them. This is a great opportunity to understand how to make Pesach very quickly. Check out this interview with Meira. So Meira, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thank you. It's really my privilege to be here. Thank you.
So you wrote a book that seems to be superhuman. It's called How to Make Pesach in 5 Days. Can you actually make Pesach in 5 days?
You actually can. And I think that people are seriously, they overstress. I don't even know why they do it. Like 5 days is all it takes to do the cleaning and the cooking for Pesach. That's all it takes.
So take us through a little bit on how you spring clean your entire house in 5 days. Are there special, like, are there things we should be thinking about? Like, how do we approach this whole area here?
Okay. So I'm going to have to just call you out on this because I didn't say we're going to spring clean in 5 days. We're actually going to clean and cook in 5 days. So if you want to
Okay.
make Pesach in 5 days, you've had to spring clean before. And that's what I'm doing now in my home, right? If I want to clean my house, I want to go through my kids' clothing or organize, or if I'm really clean, I'm like, I don't know, like cleaning the moldings or whatever. That's all spring cleaning, but it has nothing to do with Passover. It has nothing to do with Pesach, right? Those 5 days are when are we actually getting like all of the Cheerios out of our home? So I actually divide it. Like I don't really like cleaning. So I'm going to spend only 2 days cleaning and 3 days cooking, but people do it like any way they want. But the idea is just to stop stressing out. Like the holidays are something that we should be approaching and enthusiastically, like excited. And right now, people are like, "Oh no, it's Passover." It's like a word, like almost said with dread of like it's coming.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to be working and working. It doesn't have to be like that. Let's stress when we need to, but let's not stress for a month before. There's no reason.
Right. Right. It's interesting that you say what you say because the science seems to show that you get a lot more accomplished with periods of intensity than with sort of long periods of stress. And I think what you're getting at here, which really is a great bit of advice for people, which is a small period of intensity. Like if you're going to clean and go all in, that will get more done, if you will, than if it's going to be just hanging on and hanging on. And here comes Passover and I can and I can and I can. And that's going to just sort of go straight to the holiday and take away from the joy of it. I like what you're saying because I think this is just a lesson in life. It just very much applies to Pesach, which is it's all about the frame. It's all about the frame. At least in my house, if I want things to happen, it's either a party or it's a competition. Like, something's got to be going on, but for the thing. So, but the point is that if the frame is right, then people respond. Talk to me a little bit about cooking, the myth of cooking that you're trying to debunk in your book.
Okay, well, there's a lot of myths about cooking, but there's one that I really think is helpful for everybody to hear, and that is this myth of fresh. Okay, I love telling about this because people have this thing about everything all your food has to be like fresh. I have to make it last minute. But you know what? It doesn't. I used to be a caterer, okay, and I've had a lot of experience working with caterers. Do you know when a caterer once told me that he was cooking, he was a caterer for these cruises for Passover going to Alaska. And I asked him, when do you cook for this? Is it like a week before, 2 weeks before? And he's like, are you kidding me? After Hanukkah, we take a kitchen and we make it kosher for Passover. We cook everything for the cruise and then we deep freeze it.
Wow.
You're paying tens of thousands of dollars. It's not fresh. And guess what? It tastes great. When you go to a Hanukkah party and you get your latkes, you think they're making them fresh for you, right? When we make our latkes, we're like, it has to be fresh for the party. Why? Right? Why? I make my salad sometimes in advance. I just drop a paper towel in that Ziploc bag. I close it up. It's fresh. When we cook for Shabbatones, we're not making the salad fresh that morning. Everything stays. Things don't have to be fresh. You know that they sell frozen potatoes in the supermarket raw? Like you could literally make your potatoes and freeze them raw if you wanted to. That's how we buy them sometimes. People are always like, everything has to be last minute. It doesn't. I can cook a few days before and I could freeze it, like literally almost everything. I freeze my matzo balls. I make my meat and I freeze it. Because I cook for the whole Passover at one time. I cook my meat, I slice it, I freeze it.
Mhm.
Everything is frozen. There's only a few things that I make fresh and they taste fresh anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Talk to me a little bit about the Seder. What are some of the ways that you can make sure, no matter what background you're from, that the Seder becomes more of an enjoyable experience?
I think the number one tip for the Seder is smiling.
That's
People,
good.
and I'll tell you why, because kids especially need to have a positive association. And if we're coming, let's say stressed, and this is the classic scenario, you come to the Seder, people are wearing their best clothing. You probably brought something nice for your children or for yourself, right? You're sitting there. And then it takes maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes for the first cup of grape juice to be spilled on your lap. And you have a choice. You're either going to get mad, yell at someone, maybe not yell, but like give them a look, or just fake it and smile the whole time. And I'm going to suggest that we literally plaster a fake smile on our face for that entire Seder, as if this is the most amazing experience as the grape juice is being poured on your new white dress, just to stay positive, because we need to give over that message of like, being at the Seder is so important, right? We're telling everybody there that we became a nation, right? Like God took us out of Egypt, we became a nation, and now we're going to celebrate, and we are going to remember what that experience was about. And that meal has to be positive, because the joke about there's the 4 sons and everyone says, well, the 5th son is the one who didn't show up.
Yeah.
Right. We need to make sure everybody keeps showing up. And if that Seder's not positive, they're not going to show up.
It's so true. It's so true. Sometimes we lose perspective. Everything should be right and perfect. We're tense. And the Seder sort of is like a tense experience. And you're right. Kids can feel it. I have a rabbi in Israel. His name is Rabbi Levi. I called him once. I remember this like yesterday. I called him once a few hours before the Seder, his time. And I'm like, give me like a last thing to think about. Like, give me something deep, maybe something that in some, book that no one's ever heard of. Like, he's like a really big rabbi. Like, give me, he goes, I got something for you. I'm like, all right. He's like, be happy. I'm like, no, seriously. He's like, yeah, be happy, because your kids are watching. And if you're stressed, and if it's got to be perfect, everyone's going to feel tense, and then have a bad time. It's a great example and a great lesson that we all need to remember, which is the end of the day. The goal of the Seder is to deliver the message that we are lucky, and we're lucky to be here. And if we're going to lose that because of a stain or a food or, of a whatever.
Yeah. I always say, like, it's not about the brisket.
It's not about the brisket. Right. Very good. Well, Mira, thank you so much for joining us in today's show. It's an honor to have you on. If you can get the book, where can we find your book, How to Make Pesach in 5 Days?
Thanks. Well, I mean, actually, all the proceeds from the book do go to charity.
Wonderful.
So if you order it at oregon.ncsy.org/Pesach book, is a great way. Or otherwise, you could find it in bookstores in the tri-state area or on Amazon.
Okay, amazing. And we wish you a happy Pesach, happy Passover to you and yours. And thank you so much for what you're doing and shining your light on this world.
Thanks for having me.
And we thank Meira for that interview. And by the way, there's so much of that is so Passover focused, the idea that it is about the frame, this concept that reality is based on the frame of how we tell the story, the frame of what the story means to us, the frame of how we deal with cleaning and cooking and the challenges of anything. If there's one thing we learn from the Seder, is that it's about the frame. We're about to deliver the story of our people to our children, to our friends, to our family. We don't just roll in and get it done as we're munching through the second course. We sit down, we dress the table up, we have experiential moments, we eat, we lean, we delay eating because to show the family how important it is. This is all setting up a narrative, all setting up a frame. It's very much in how Meira speaks about getting prepared for Passover, but it's also very critical for how me and you operate our Passover. The narrative that we share, the frame that we have, the perspective going in is going to change the experience, and that will deliver more than maybe the words that we even say. Before we introduce our next guest, I want to show you this short documentary as to the person that we're about to meet. Check this out.
So I went to work for this agency that, among other things, I was charged, and this is just out of law school, with implementing this practically unknown provision of the National Energy Act to promote renewable energy as a way of reducing our country's reliance on foreign sources of oil and gas. And one opportunity that came up was a chance to go to the Middle East to help one of our clients, Brooklyn Union Gas, build a natural gas pipeline that would run from Egypt to Israel and bring natural gas for the first time to the state of Israel.
When Merrill was going over to Cairo, he went over with 2 of his clients who worked for a gas company. It was a great adventure. The only issue is that I was like almost 8 months pregnant. So that was a little scary in case baby, decided to come while he was gone.
I went to Cairo with 2 employees from Brooklyn Union Gas, Kobe Hoffman, who was vice president, and Bob Guidi, who I had not met until we went to Egypt. It was with that in mind that we went over, and that Brooklyn Union Gas thought it was a great opportunity to build a pipeline, which was a bridge between the Arabs and the Jews. So it was a full day of meetings. We also had the opportunity to take a couple of hours off. So Bob Guidi and I went off to see the Sphinx, to visit the pyramids. We rode the camels, and it was our half day of sightseeing in Cairo, and it was truly wonderful. We then were planning the following day to go to Israel to meet with our counterparts over there, and we had similar meetings set up. We decided to eat at a traditional Middle Eastern restaurant that was located right in the hotel we were staying, the Intercontinental Hotel. We got seated at a table. Unbeknownst to me, there was a man who had come into the restaurant and had specifically asked to be seated next to us. And as I turned to pick up my jacket to go, I heard the first gunshot. And I turned back to see this look of surprise on Kobe's face, who was sitting directly across from me. The look of surprise was because he had been shot. And I still was not exactly sure what was going on, but now I saw him swing his gun toward Bob. The gun turned and the man shot Bob twice in the chest. This was an Islamic extremist. I thought, he's killing Americans. Run. And as soon as I turned, the first shot hit me, which would have hit me in my heart had I not turned. And I kept running. And then the second bullet hit me. I don't know exactly the trajectory, but it severed my femoral artery.
From a shot to a femoral artery, you can bleed into the thigh, out of the artery, and you can lose a lot of volume, a lot of blood. And unless you get to the point where you immediately stop the bleeding, sometimes you can die rather quickly.
So I crawled as much as I could, and then I couldn't crawl anymore. And I was bleeding fairly badly.
As a patient, when you're looking down and you're an innocent bystander, you see that you're bleeding. You never had any specific training. You're not sure what to do, whether to apply pressure or call somebody. A lot of things can be going through your mind. Obviously, shock is definitely can impede your ability to make the right decision at that moment.
I was completely vulnerable and open, and I was expecting the shot to come. And I had enough time to think about what was about to happen, to think about my wife, Lois, who was 8 months pregnant with my first child, and to think about not being able to meet him or her. And then I became very peaceful, and I made peace with my Maker. And I was calm, and I was ready. And the shot didn't come.
There had been a report of an incident at the Semiramis Hotel, and it was bedlam, I think is the best way to describe it.
As it was later reported to me, he threw down his gun. He again said, Allahu Akbar, Nushkar Allah, thank God I didn't kill any Muslims. As I struggled to stay alive, that the thoughts that occurred to me were of, once I thought about my son or my daughter, I didn't know at the time, I felt I needed to survive because I needed them to know their father. But when they eventually got us out of the hotel and to a hospital, it was a horrible situation.
Every second does count. And it's, there is such a concept, especially in trauma emergency medicine, that there is a concept of golden hour. And what you do in the first 60 minutes or even less than that when somebody's bleeding, and especially if there's a suspicion for an arterial injury.
And one of our Egyptian employees assisted in making sure that he was moved to a hospital that had better facilities. And I think that's probably one of the things that saved him.
They were reporting on television that several people had been killed, and I think that they had mentioned Merrill as one of the people that had died. You know, the people that were letting me know what was going on were really concerned that I might have heard some misinformation.
I believe that my unborn child saved my life, my need to meet this child, and for him to know his father was so important to me that I had to survive. I didn't understand why I survived, what the plan was. It affected my relationship with God or just even with life. I mean, to really, really try and make sense of something like that.
Merrill Kramer is an attorney, an active member in the Jewish community in the greater Washington, D.C. area. He practices law at the firm of Pierce Atwood, LLP, where he specializes in energy project finance and renewable energy. Merrill has been ranked as one of the top energy lawyers in the country by Chambers USA, Washington, D.C.'s super lawyers, and the Legal 500. Merrill grew up with his family, with strong Zionist and Jewish leaders in Detroit. He resides in Bethesda, Maryland with his wife and 3 sons and serves on many boards and organizations. Check out this interview that I had with Merrill Kramer. Well, Merrill, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So your story is unbelievable. And it has a lot of Passoverness to it. You know, the Jew in Egypt on his way to Israel, just seeing the pyramids. Like there's a lot of the background being about the story of Passover. But in looking at your story, there's a lot of, I think, a lot of the lessons of Passover as well. And I'd love if you can take us on the inside a drop. Being in the restaurant after recognizing what was going on, facing what is most likely the greatest challenge you faced to date in this environment. How did you have the strength to run away, to crawl away? Where did you find, if you will, that personal strength to save your life?
My wife was pregnant, 8 months pregnant with our first child. And I thought about her, and I thought about the child who was going to be born and who might never see his father, never meet his father, and I might never meet my child. And that was my anchor. I hung on to that to survive. Despite the severity of my wounds, I fought through going unconscious. I fought through the moment. But then there did come a moment where I was convinced that I was not going to survive the attack. And I became very peaceful, and I made peace with my maker. And I was ready and I was prepared for the final bullet, which, thank God, did not come.
It's a tremendous thing that you sharing with us, and we thank you for sharing it with us. The ability to tap into something because of a cause greater than self, and what that does. From that moment, you know, in many ways, you know, challenge sort of gives birth to new opportunity, to new understanding, to new meaning. What happened after that, if you don't mind sharing? Not in terms of physically, but in terms of just your perspective when it was clear that you were going to make it, when you left Egypt, if you will, literally left Egypt. What what gave birth, I guess, from a place of perspective that maybe wasn't there beforehand?
Well, it wasn't as if there was an epiphany at that moment, a finding of God, a finding of the meaning of life. I had been badly shot. My colleagues were dead. It was difficult to understand why I survived and why they, who also had children, didn't. It took a long time. I was vulnerable. I had never gone through that. And what happened most was I began to connect and understand what it meant to be a victim. And I searched, I turned to my rabbis. It was the ultimate existential question about why someone lives and why someone dies.
Yeah.
And that question is with me to this day. There's no question that it changed me, that this was a miracle. And it's changed the way I've lived my life, for sure. And it's changed my relationship with my children, particularly with my son, who I finally made it home to see my wife give birth to.
Wow.
Who was it? I guess Albert Einstein. He was a pretty smart guy. I'm maybe paraphrasing him, but I think he once said something like, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle.
Oh, wow. I'd love to explore that just a little bit more on what you just said, because it was very powerful when I heard it. And I'm sure it's having an impact on the viewers now, which is to live your life as if everything's a miracle. I've never heard that quote, and I absolutely adore it. And it seems like it's a very powerful way to live your life. So share us just a little bit about that life in which you're constantly in a place. Of course, you live in, there are moments of your life where it's regular moments and it's mundane, but how does one do that? What are some of the ways that we all can live our lives as if everything's a miracle?
I remember when I finally made it back to the US after stops at a number of hospitals and surgeries. I was at the US Naval Hospital in Bethesda, and I looked out the window. It was now late fall and the leaves were changing. And I saw the colors. I saw the billion colors as if it was the first time. So whether it was that, whether it was the birth of my child, or, as you mentioned when you started, my Passover has meant something very different to me since that experience. How many other people can say that God spared their life and let them out of Egypt? Literally.
Literally, right. It's an unbelievable, even the story, you had gone, from what I understand, that day or the day before to see the pyramids, to really, to sort of, you were in Egypt. It wasn't like you were just in a hotel in some place called Egypt. And you were there trying to create, something new and bridge it to Israel. There's so many pieces of the story that is so much, a part of the Seder. But in many ways, what you've gone through and what you've taken from it, from just a little that we're getting today, I believe is very much in the lessons of the Seder, which is these ideas that God has been for generations trying to get into us, to believe in more than self, to recognize there's something deeper than self, to see the world as miraculous, to reach and to be optimists. That's the story of the Jewish people that had faced the highest level odds and survived. And in many ways, I'm speaking to one right now that in an individual capacity faced very similar odds in a very similar land and survived. And is here to tell the world that don't be fooled by life. It's miraculous. I guess I'll ask one more question. Like, share with us a little bit, if you just for our sake, if you can possibly put into words what it felt like to see your son after having, and your wife, after going from a place of making peace with your maker on a restaurant floor in Cairo to now finally being able to see them. Like, what was that experience like? I know it's impossible to describe it, maybe just to allow us a little bit to be a part of that moment for a moment.
Well, it was pretty extraordinary. The setting was also pretty crazy because I at that time I was barely walking, so they had set up a bed next to my wife's. So when I would go over and she would go into labor and I would get her to huff and puff, by the time the contractions ended, I was exhausted and I would collapse in my bed. She would collapse in her bed. So in that sense, it was rather unusual experience. But yes, the moment of birth was, because of that juxtaposition, was extraordinary, because I had just experienced death, and everything I had gone through to that point was about death, and I survived it to witness birth, my first child, and there's no greater miracle to witness that's more affirming than something like that. Yeah. So it's what allowed me to survive, and it's what has allowed me to remember that moment and all of the things that had to happen along the way for me to make it to this point, to be able to talk to you, Charlie. It's all just affirming and reaffirming every day, and particularly on Pesach, which it's a dynamic holiday, and there's so many stories, and every time you read it, it's as if you're reading it differently. And I grew up in a conservative house, but it was a big family. My cousins had gone to Camp Ramah, so the singing and the voice, and they had one of my cousins, like Chazan, and he's not even the best voice in the family.
Wow.
So it was always a wonderful holiday. It was the time to be together with family. Every time you told the story, every time you begin to debate what and why, it becomes a renewed experience. But now, in one way, because of my experience, it's separated me in a way from my family, because no one there, at least, has experienced and seen Passover this way. But it's just another way of looking and telling the story and affirming what happened to our people, what happened to me, and the miracle of life, the miracle of God.
Amazing. Meryl, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us something that was so personal and so meaningful to you. It has inspired me incredibly, and I am sure it has inspired all our viewers tonight. And we thank you. We wish you a Chag Sameach, happy Passover to you and your family, and may you and all of us only know simchas and good times, and really see the miracle part going forward. And thank you for who you are and shining your light on this world.
It's my pleasure, Charlie. Thank you.
And I want to thank Meryl again for sharing us that story. It wasn't easy for him, as you can see, but he did it. He did it for us. And we thank Meryl for that. We thank him for allowing us to be with him at that moment and to learn the lessons afterwards. What I really want to stress from that interview is a piece that really comes together very much in line with the Passover story. Not to mention, like I said, it took place in Egypt on the way to Israel. The idea that there's something inside us that we need and can tap into when the going gets tough. The Jewish people didn't know who they were in Passover. The Jewish people never thought for a million years they could be God's people, get the book that changes the world, manna from heaven. No one thought that was even possible. God put them through this experience and showed them who you are is so much greater than who you think you are. The story of Merrill was being able to tap into a piece of himself he didn't know existed before. But it goes so much further, that the way you find yourself is when you attach yourself to something bigger than yourself. The way he found strength was attaching himself to his unborn child and to his wife, to his ability to be a father, to God. The way we find strength is when we become more. We're part of our people. Exodus wasn't for Moses and Aaron, it's for all of us. We became one nation. We attached to more, but this is the best part. What a great line from Albert Einstein, no? Either you believe everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle. Well, if you believe everything's a miracle, then your whole life is different. You become miraculous. Those are the lessons of Passover. We can be more when we believe that we're united in greater purpose, and when we understand that everything's a miracle anyways. The lessons of an individual that apply to me and you, especially during this period of time. We thank you, Merrill, for being here today and sharing your story, and we hope that we learn from your story to make our lives even greater. Check out this amazing video from Aish.com called Passover in the Krakow Ghetto. Wow. Wow. What an incredible story. What an incredible lesson of what freedom really is. There are people sitting in the lap of luxury and they are slaves. And there were people sitting in ghettos, totally free. Freedom from Egypt is not a physical place, it's a spiritual concept. At least it is now. Every one of us has the things that are holding us back. In Hebrew, Egypt is called Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is from the word Meitzar, which is contracted. Every one of us has things that are blocking us. that have contracted us into thinking small, being small, holding grudges, not being uncomfortable, taking things for granted, small thinking, small living. The night of Passover, we have this tremendous energy that comes from God that allows us to be big people, to be big, to be spiritually free. No matter where you are, no matter what kind of Seder you have the opportunity to be fully free. We thank H.com for another beautiful video. Before we get to our next guest, please watch this short video about the Red Sea Diving Resort mission. Our next guest is former Mossad agent. I love saying that, just for the record. I just love the fact that I just said that. Our next guest is a former Mossad agent. I just want you to know how much I appreciate saying those words. Yola Reitman, and she shares her leading role in Operation Brothers to rescue Ethiopian Jews, as seen in this film, the Netflix movie Red Sea Diving Resort, a heroic journey from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. Check out this interview with Yola. So Yola, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
And I want to first begin by thanking you for your service. I mean, as a member of the Jewish people, the fact that you sacrificed yourself in your life for our brothers and sisters is something that's super inspiring. And I just want to thank you for who you are.
Thank you. Well, this is what so many people in Israel are doing most of their lives, in the army, in the Mossad, in many other capacities. Our life here in Israel is usually a life of struggle, as was our history through the centuries and as was our history in the last 100 years in Israel.
Yeah. And it's
so
inspiring to watch.
Part of it. I'm just a part of it.
It's inspiring to watch. I want to sort of jump in a little bit. The Red Sea Spa is one of the greatest stories in our history. It's so connected to Pesach on so many levels, both in its location and in just the story of freedom and exodus that took place. Share with us a little bit, if you can. How did you get involved in it? What was the moment that you said, I'm going to do this? Take us inside a little bit from your perspective, how you got involved.
Well, actually, it was, to be the right person at the right time, the right place. It was like I was so suitable to this operation in so many different ways. So even though I had an incredible chance, it was to me so natural to become part of it. And because of everything that I was at that time. And here in Israel, people, and usually if you are involved in society, you get a chance because people know you, think about you, and people are all the time on the lookout for other people to do certain things for them.
Right. When you were down in that spa, so you're there for, I think, for 3 years. Is that how long was
Yeah,
the operational? 3
yeah.
years. That's a
It was a
long
bit more
time.
than that. Yeah, around 4 years. Yeah.
4 years. So
Yeah,
that's
this is
not a weekend, right? Like people think of the
no.
story like it took place over like a week. It didn't. It was a long time that you were there.
It was a long time. There were several different operations. First with the Navy, after that with the Air Force, and so it was an ongoing thing till we had to just flee and get away from there, and it continued even after that, because the
Right.
Mossad did not give up, and they continued with different people with a different cover story, continued smuggling people out.
Right.
Till they had to stop again, for security reasons,
Right.
for safety reasons.
And for those that are watching, this is what's called Operation Brothers that took place in the early 80s. It was followed by Operation Moses and then ultimately
Right.
Operation Solomon. And this really was
Yeah.
this really is a testament to the Israeli government in that, these are people from, a different part of the world that reached out and said, we want to come home. And they did, the unthinkable and bring them home.
Right. Yeah.
I want to go into your life, if you don't mind taking us during that period of time. And what was it like to be there, to be at a constant threat of danger, but knowing that you were involved in something so important as somebody else's freedom?
Okay, when you're in such a situation, it is, first of all, it is an exhilarating feeling. You're so overwhelmed by what you are doing and what you are part of. You don't think about the dangers. You are you are careful, of course, and you are very observant, and you're very alert to everything. But you're not scared all the time, of course. So because you're involved in doing, and you're absorbed by doing the things.
Right.
But to be part of, in so many aspects, it is so out of the ordinary. First of all, to be part of the Mossad, to act as somebody else, to play in a kind of story. It is like acting on the stage for 24 hours, 7 days a week. It is a kind of experience that is overshadows so many other things that people are doing. The thing that I did after that, thing that I did before that, even though it was really part of my dreams, my being, because I always felt I need to save the world. I want to do something for my country, and I want to be like the boys. I was a girl who always wanted to take part in boys' games, to be part in the army. At that time, we didn't have the same opportunities that we have today. Today, women take part in so many different activities that were closed to women in my time.
Right.
And so this is actually what drove me on, not the feeling of danger.
Amazing. Do you have moments that you can remember? I can only imagine what it must have been like watching the refugees, the Ethiopians, whoever, and watching them leave, knowing they left, knowing they got out over 3 years, watching thousands sort of like you're still there, and you're sort of watching more families, individuals, sort of leave to freedom. Were there any moments in particular that you can share with us where you just sort of stopped and said, wow, like this is really something special?
First of all, everything was so special, especially that I had most of the time, I had really a vivid vision of the history of our people. First of all, because I was so involved in stories about everything that happened before my time when I was still young and I couldn't take part in the things. And this was like a natural step that became after so many other operations by the Mossad, by the country. Before that, the illegal Olim in the time of the British Mandate. And before that, it was like the same story all over and over again. And this is also something that you have to know. The Mossad is so different in when you compare it to other intelligence communities like the CIA, KGB. I think the Mossad is the only intelligence agency that deals with this kind of problems in addition to the regular, in intelligence gathering.
Right.
They always took care of Jews in dangerous countries. They always smuggled them into the country one way or the other. And it was always part of their activities.
Right.
So I always had a feeling that I'm like a part of a chain of events.
Sure.
And it is part of history. And as you said, Exodus right.
Yeah.
Completely.
And I think it's so powerful in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the story of the Jews leaving with each other. And even if you think of the story of the Red Sea, it's like so amazing that like we have a moment where we're crossing the Yam Suf and we're helping each other through.
Right.
And in many ways, you're a part of this mission that, centuries later are helping Jews by the Red Sea to cross through. Looking back, once you got back to Israel, now even where you're standing now, what are some of the lessons that you think we can learn from this operation? What are some of the things that you take away now that apply to our lives today that we can learn, especially as we relate to this period of time where we are in our history, where we are in our calendar, that is things that you learned from that operation?
There are quite a few things that I learned from that period in my life. The first of all, that is that taking part in an important matter that don't concern you personally, and don't give and not doing things for yourself at the moment, doing for the others or for a bigger cause, is something that gives you so much strength and so much meaning, and is very meaningful, makes your life meaningful.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned is that when you have an opportunity, don't start thinking about the downsides of it. Grab it, do it, and hope for the best, because most of the time there are good surprises behind the corner, not bad ones. And
Great.
people usually hesitate too much. Oh, well, it's too dangerous. What will I get out of it? Will they? I don't know. So many things that you should not think about them at the same moment. You have an opportunity which is exciting. Just go for it.
Great.
Don't hesitate, even if you risk something. And I learned it, and in one way it was very natural to me, but I know now that it is so right and true, and I acted like that the rest of my life about everything. I would never back away from an opportunity that I had for something just because I'm frightened. I would never do that.
Amazing. Yola, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for what you do for
You're
our
welcome.
people. And thank you for being an inspiration to us. We really appreciate it. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you. Good luck and happy Passover.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I got to tell you, I was so moved by just speaking with her and just understanding what took place. Forget the whole Red Sea connection, which is awesome. Let's just put that to the side for a second. Here are people that are willing to risk their life, to change their life, to pause their life for other Jews, for no other purpose other than the fact that they're Jewish. The imagery in my mind of Ethiopian Jews being put on boats and sent to safety reminds me what it must have been like when the Jews crossed the Red Sea the first time, helping each other through the sea. No man, woman, or child left behind. God must have looked down with such pride. We take care of each other. We're one nation, whether we met or not, whether we look the same or not. What I loved about that interview was how normal she thought it was. Notice that it wasn't even seen as like, I'm the greatest. It was normal for her. It's the power of our people. It's the power of what we can become, where it's normal, so to speak, to give up of ourselves for each other. And her words in the interview meant a lot. Take big risks. Be there for each other. Help take each other out of our own Egypts. Who do you know in your life, whether you have to fly across the world or just look across the table, that can use some help getting out of Egypt? It's the power of that night. It's the power of what we have with each other. I just want to give a special shout out to Rabbi Yaakov Ginniker and his team. Not easy to get these people. And to be able to go out and secure YOLO is a big deal, and we appreciate it. And thanks for all that you do, and thanks for being here. With that, I want to thank all of you for being a part of this show. We have this rule that every Seder we have to see ourselves as if we came out of the Egypt ourselves. Well, how do we do that? The answer is when we start to realize that the Seder is bigger than one story. The Seder takes place throughout our lives. And the lessons of the Jews leaving Egypt, of connecting to depth, of believing in God, of having hope, of being there for each other, of realizing that everything's a miracle. These are the lessons that enable us to come out of our own personal Egypts. These are the lessons that enable us to help each other come out of our own Egypts. These are the lessons that make us the people worthy of the relationship with God. In many ways, Passover is that amazing reset button of the year. You know, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is the reset button, personally, so to speak. We get judged individually. Passover is the reset button communally, familially, nationally, where I see myself as a part of something bigger than myself. And I commit myself to more. In many ways, that's what Shabbat's about, which is why the Shabbat that's coming up before Passover is called Shabbat HaGadol, which is the Shabbat of being big. Because Shabbat is constantly trying to remind us, pull back the lens. Pull back the lens. It's so much bigger. Your life is not individualized. It's bigger. You know, when you go into Shabbat, I think I've said this in the show once before, but when you go into Shabbat, everyone lights a candle for themselves. You go to a house, sometimes you'll see multiple candles. When you come out of Shabbat, you have one candle. It's called the Havdalah candle. If you notice when you go in, there's all these separate wicks, a candelabra of multiple wicks. You go to a Shabbaton, you'll see a table full of separate wicks. But when you come out of Shabbat, all those wicks join together to make one Havdalah candle. That's what Shabbat's supposed to do. You pull the lens back and realize, hey, I'm part of something bigger. I don't have an individual wick. And when I realize I'm part of something bigger, my connection to fire, which is spirituality, goes only stronger. It's Passover. Together with God, we can do anything. So on behalf of me and mine to you and yours, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Passover is in the air. And we look forward with God's help to seeing you next week before we wish you a happy Passover. But until then, let's begin thinking about it. Let's begin seeing it. Let's begin prepping for it. Let's begin, whether it's physical cleaning or spiritual cleaning. Let us begin to prepare ourselves for that great time that's coming our way. And so I hope and pray that we get to somehow pull out a miracle, which is possible, which is completely doable for God, and do the show next week from Jerusalem. But if not, we hope to see you here. Have an incredible weekend. A good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
You're just falling down, falling down. I'll pick you up, and if you feel like you're outnumbered on a battleground, and